So hey, if you are here, great to or if you're a first-time guest, so glad you're with us. We're gonna jump right in because we have a lot of content to cover. We're in the series on the Sermon on the Mount. You got signaled, we're gonna have some mature content. We'll keep it very frank, but not crass, but we do want you to know that that's coming. So if you haven't taken them out, this is your last opportunity because here we go. So we live in an interesting culture, right? Whenever it comes to dating and it comes to relationships and intimacy or sexuality. So for some of you have grown up with smartphones and with apps and with, social media kind of being your primary form for connecting and for doing relationships. There was a day inside the church and outside of the church where if a guy wanted to date a girl, he would come over to her house, right, under the protection of mom and of dad, get to know her family, they could get to know him, screen that guy, run a little interference on that guy, which, by the way, that's still the plan at my house, right? I have two daughters, both teenagers now. That's our plan. If some guy would like to date one of my girls, first they're gonna need to really love Jesus and read their Bible. We'll do a background check, homeland security, all those things. Then he's really going to need to win my affection, right? Bring me flowers, hold my hand, sing me a song, stare into my eyes and tell me that he loves me, make my heart flutter. And if he gets my approval, then he can date my daughters. I've got to, he can date one of my daughters. Didn't want that to come out wrong. And maybe you're like, that's so outdated and overbearing. Nope, that is biblical and that is beautiful. Listen, because there's not a man alive that loves my daughters as much as I do. God willing, one day there will be a man that will be her spouse and love them as much, but not a category that exists for a guy that will ever love them more. So I love my girls, want great things. But you understand, our culture has shifted, and now we have dating apps, we have websites from starting back with eHarmony, Match.com, Christian Mingle, people wanting to find somebody to date, right? I'm trying to find that person. I'm trying to find the one. And I'm for sure not knocking any of those, especially as they were originally intended to maybe help you meet someone with similar interests, someone who is compatible for you. But now I would even say that in many ways, dating apps have shifted from finding someone to date, maybe make a love connection, marry, to finding someone to just be with for the evening, right? So we've got the advent of the disposable relationship. So you have Tinder and some other apps primarily being used by someone looking to have sex with someone else for the night with no relationship beyond that. It's just straight up lust, right? She's hot. He's hot, I find them sexually alluring, swipe right, okay? So this is kind of where we find ourselves now, which is why Jesus' words as we come to week number 5 of the Drop the Mic series, I would say are as powerful and relevant now today as they were when he first spoke them. And our theme for today, we're calling this Be Strong, right? With subtitling it, guard your heart, guard your mind. And whether it comes to sexuality, the female body, beauty, desires of the heart. What does Jesus have to say about those things? And so we've been looking at these collection of Jesus' most important teachings that are called the Sermon on the Mount, kind of his vision for a whole new way to be human. So we start off with the blessings, then kind of this idea, be salt and light, be better, and now he's giving us ways to how we can do that practically. So we pick it up today in chapter 5. Now we're in verse 27. Here's what Matthew records Jesus as saying. He goes, "You have heard that it was said, 'You shall not commit adultery.' But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell." So let's break this down. And okay, starting off, once again, Jesus is quoting from the Old Testament, from the 10 Commandments. The first line, that is Exodus 20:15. That is number 7 of the commandments where we're told, you shall not commit adultery. And listen, So 2 weeks ago, we looked at how Jesus said, do not murder. And probably nobody in the room has that in their background. Like maybe someone has that story. Most likely nobody has that. But there is a very strong likelihood that there is someone or someone's in the room today that have been unfaithful to their spouse, right? And I would say in part because there's just so little fallout for that anymore in our culture. And please hear me, our goal and Jesus' goal is not to attack anyone, but he's going to reveal how someone gets there and then going to address how to fight for joy and for health and for fun in our marriages. But then he goes on, right? So he starts off, do not commit adultery, but says, anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart, which probably means that 99% of the men in the room just got implicated, right? You're like, uh-oh, wait, what? Because that seems like an impossible idea for most of us. You're going, come on, Jesus, we live in America, right? DFW 2019, there are beautiful women everywhere. Like you can't even really go to the mall, to the grocery store to grab milk without basically being exposed to softcore porn, right? Whether it's on a billboard or in a magazine or some woman dressed very revealing. And it's winter now, right? Like wait till it warms up. Like that seems like, whatever. And I think the temptation then is to kind of want to write Jesus off as being out of touch with reality or with our day. Or on the other side, to just end up in this vicious spiral, in this vicious cycle of guilt and of shame, and I'm just throwing in the towel, there's no way, rather than trusting that Jesus is this really brilliant teacher who is for us, right? And knows exactly what it is that he's talking about. And let's be clear here, Jesus is not talking about the appreciation of or the noticing of beauty, okay? Right? There are beautiful people everywhere, all over the world, whatever your definition for beauty is, right? I'm not defining that for you. I'm not limiting it. Whatever your definition of beauty would be, all over the place. To which I would ask, is that a good thing or is it a bad thing? Beauty. It's totally good, right? So back in Genesis 1, after God gets done doing all creation, he records this. God saw that all that he made, and it was very good, right? That word for good there, that is an aesthetic word, meaning it's about appearance, it's about sight. Like he looked and he saw that it was good. So noticing that a person is beautiful, a woman is attractive, a man is attractive, that's not a sin, right? That is healthy, that is normal. There's not even a problem here with what Jesus is talking about with sexual desire, not in and of itself as God designed it. Not with beauty, not with the female body, not with the male body. Those things are all good. And do you know how I know that is true? Because I can read in Genesis 1 and in Genesis 2, where we're clear that God is for sex, right? Like that's his official position on the issue. It's also our official position, if you're new, totally for it. God created it, God designed it. Satan then loves to act like it's his idea and twist it and pervert it. And God's going, excuse me? Like I've got the patent for that thing on the desk in my office. Like what is it that you're talking about? Okay? Whenever God brings Eve to Adam to be his bride, Adam is so excited, right? And do you know how I know that Adam is excited? You know how I know? Because he writes her a poem, right? He sings her a song. Like a dude has to be pretty fired up to break into poetry or to start to serenade a woman. But this is what it is in the Hebrew. His first words spoken are about Eve, and it's really a poem or a song. And this is what he says when he sees her. This is now bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. Like, whoa, easy there, Tiger, right? Scandalous. like I hear Barry White, some smooth R&B going on right there. And God's not offended, right? God's not going, Adam, knock it off in my office now, right? Like God brought him a naked wife. I'm pretty sure he knew what was going to happen next, right? So God's not against sex, sexuality, the physical desires of the body. Here's the next thing Jesus isn't talking about. He's not talking about this momentary flash of sexual desire that comes when you see an attractive man, an attractive woman in a revealing outfit, and something that accentuates their physique. Okay, that is temptation, right? For sure, it's not a sin. And don't confuse those two, right? You have to be sure not. We'll talk more about that in a moment, but being tempted is not a sin. Whenever you see someone for the first time, not a sin. We can't always control temptation, right? You can influence it by what you watch on TV, movies, by the kind of social media you look at, by the kind of sites you visit, by the kind of places you go. You can for sure have a say in temptation, but you can't always control that instant moment when it first pops up. So what he is talking about is looking at a woman, looking at a person with the intent to get sexual gratification from her body, from his body, from whatever that would be. And whenever we use the word look, right? So we use the word look in a couple different ways. We use it for just a quick glance. So you looked up and you noticed like, oh, I saw it, I looked. We also use it for kind of that prolonged gaze, this ongoing, lingering gaze to stare, which is creepy and awkward, and you should knock that off. But in context, right? So in context here, as Jesus is talking, the focus is on intent. So here's the idea. It is looking to lust, right? So that's the point, right? It's the look to lust move. So it's not even necessarily justifying a quick glance, but it's really not about length of the gaze at all, right? That's not the point. The point is, again, heart, motive, intent, looking to lust. Scott McKnight says this in his commentary on the Sermon on the Mount. He calls it intentionally fostering sexual temptation and arousal through the imagination. Meaning this, right? So wrong desire for really anything, whatever the wrong desire might be for, including sex, begins in the eye of the mind, in the imagination, fostering some thought. And so then instead of you give into the feeling, rather than fighting against it, you begin to cultivate it and it takes root in your heart. And so Jesus is warning, right? Here's what he's doing. He's warning about the outcome of doing that because he knows where it leads. In fact, Jesus' younger brother, James, writes about this same idea in his book in James 1 verse 15, where he says this: after desire has conceived, and again, wrong desire, it gives birth to sin. So first desire, then sin. Sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. And in this case, death of relationship, death of intimacy, right? Death of passion. It leads to death of love. And it all starts way back here, right? Long before the act itself. And it starts with the look to lust move, right? And so one of the greatest examples that we have, I think, in the Bible, one of the stories that demonstrates this the best is the story of David and Bathsheba. And maybe you're new to church and don't know. So Bathsheba, she's bathing and King David sees her. He's clearly tempted. He begins to lust in his heart, gives in to the look to lust move, has her brought to his bedroom, to his room, sleeps with her, finds out she's pregnant, tries to cover it up. When he's not able to cover it up, he has her husband sent to the front lines of battle so that he would die, so he can swoop in, marry Bathsheba, and then try to again cover up and move on. And it doesn't work, and it just creates even more heartache, which I would say is such a heartbreaking story because, come on, this is not how we want to remember David. Right? Like if you've been in the church for some time, been hanging out for a while, like there are stories of David that we love. We love the David and Goliath story, right? The young, humble, passionate shepherd boy that shows up on the battlefield and he's just so zealous for the glory and the holiness of God that he rushes out against the big, mean, bully giant and takes him out, right? So that's an inspiring story. How many of you here have ever been encouraged by the Psalms, right? And David's words there, which are just so powerful. Or when his crazy, unstable boss tries to kill him, like throws a spear at his head, David just ducks and then goes right back to serving the crazy, maniacal king. And some of you are like, I so feel you, man. Like I've had that boss. I am going to try and be more like David. So we pray, please God, help me be more like that David, humble servant, shepherd, and warrior, and king, and poet and man after God's own heart. Yes, God, sign me up for that. And then we come and we read his story there with Bathsheba, where he like breaks half of the commandments in one day. And like, oh, on second thought, God, scratch that last prayer request. I feel like I may have jumped the gun on that. I would like a do-over. Take that one off. Right? And here's what we read in 2 Samuel about David, chapter 11, verse 1. So we're told kind of the setup of that story. It says, in the spring, at the time when kings go off to war, David remained in Jerusalem. So David is the king, right? Kings go off to war in the spring. So in the winter, when it's really harsh, in that time period, it was too hard to fight, so they'd kind of take a break, put it on pause. Now back to war, David doesn't go. He sticks around, which is part of the problem, right? Because he wasn't where he was supposed to be, or he was where he wasn't supposed to be, however you want to play that out. So you realize oftentimes what we see happen, that's where it begins. I'm somewhere that I shouldn't have been or wasn't where I should have been, but we won't have time for that one today, and Jesus doesn't address that in this teaching. But again, this scene is a great example of Jesus' teaching here, because David, walking around on his rooftop, sees the woman bathing. So in Jerusalem, you have lots of hills, right? So they have often terraced landscaping. So a lot of houses built on the hills, and the palace would have been like at one of the higher points of the city. So from the rooftop, he can see lots and lots of homes. And again, he sees Bathsheba, and we use that word see for notices, so he noticed something, or also to gaze, to stare, to focus on that. So he saw Bathsheba, then he found that she was beautiful to gaze or look at. And when he first sees her, right, when he first sees her, when he first notices that that's not a sin, right? Like come on, you and I, we live in a culture where it is hard not to notice, at least on occasion, someone that is sexually alluring, right? That's hard not to notice. Here's what Satan would love to do. One thing that Satan loves to do there is to make you and I feel like being tempted is a sin. And you have to hear me, it's not a sin. And do you know why Satan wants you and I to think that that is a sin? Because if he can get that train rolling, right? If I can just get that train rolling down the tracks, convince you that you have already blown it and screwed up, well, then it's much easier, way easier to build momentum from there. Because how hard have you tried before not to break a diet, right? Or some goal or something that you set until you ate the first cookie or donut or ice cream or whatever. You're like, okay, you've got all this willpower and I'm not gonna break, and there's like all this tension around that very first cookie or thing. We're like, I'm not gonna eat the cookie, I'm not gonna do it, I'm gonna be strong, until you cave, right? And then it's easier to do it again. And then you're 5, 6, 10 cookies in, right? Just me. And you're like, oh my gosh, what just happened, right? But that very first cookie, you thought about that for a really, really long time. Okay, so if Satan can get you and I to think that being tempted is wrong, right? If that's a sin, then it's much easier to convince you to take another step beyond that. But you have to understand, feeling like we could do something wrong, that's not wrong, okay? It is then, what's wrong is taking the bait, right? And just hanging out there and sticking around there and letting it turn into something else. So we always have the choice, right? There's always the choice. David, so David saw her, and he could have looked away, he could have walked away, he could have called the landscaping company, right? He's the king, like, I'm gonna need some shrubs, right? Trees, man, like lots of really tall trees right about here, right? Not so much over there, that's fine there. Right about here, lots of trees. Put a rush order on that, like Amazon Prime. I need you to get those in today, right? That's what I need. But he doesn't do that. He saw her. Now he is tempted, and what does he choose, right? He chose to gaze, to look, to lust, to fantasize, to dwell on that. And listen, whenever that thing first pops up, right, when you first notice, you first see like, oh, she's hot, he's hot, okay. Well, you don't have to continue on with that, right? At the mall, at the beach, at the pool, right? Dude's putting the sunglasses on so you can do the sideways glance without anybody noticing, right? Knock it off. Some of you guys know. Being tempted is not a sin. Giving in, right? Then giving into it, that becomes the sin, right? We all get tempted. We understand that. And David is not serious about this thing. And so he's like, whatever, not a big deal. I'm just looking, just, window shopping a little bit. And so then what happens next? So here's the progression, right? He steps into the small sin of just looking, just leering, maybe violating her privacy a little bit and watching. And then what happens? Then that sin grows bigger and bigger. Why? Because sin never satisfied. It's always about what you and I can't have in the moment. So it just always wants more. It's like drinking salt water. It just makes you thirstier, right? And so it never satisfies because there's always more forbidden fruit. And David just becomes casual, nonchalant about it, like whatever, I'm just watching, just enjoying the view. And you recognize the entire time, right? All along, God is trying to give him opportunity to hit the eject button. So we'll go read whenever he asks his servant who this woman is. Watch his response, right? And this is, again, trying to give him opportunity to opt out of this. So here's what it records. After David asks, the man said, she is Bathsheba. So first, let's make it personal and give her a name, right? Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam and the wife of Uriah the Hittite. Meaning number one, daughter, right? She's someone's daughter. Here's who her dad is. Hey, maybe you know him. Maybe you met him around the palace. He's got his sign for you in the yard, right? Remember Eliam? Oh, and then your wife. Of Uriah, one of your soldiers, one of the mighty men, one of the guys that fought and risked their life for you before you're even king. Remember that guy, David? So again, trying to give him opportunity to opt out and not do this thing. David's like, whatever, bring her to me. And the guy's like, where, in the courtyard, the palace, at a public restaurant? David's like, nope, in my bedroom. Okay, well, it's gonna go bad, right? And it does go bad. And so he's casual with the small sin, right? And then it just grows. It grows bigger and bigger. Eugene Peterson, he wrote a book called Leap Over a Wall, and he talks about this scene. And here's what he records about how David, right? David, this great warrior king, but all of a sudden he has this moment, could go from one sin to another to another. And I thought this was really interesting. He wrote this. David didn't feel like a sinner when he sent for Bathsheba. He felt like a lover. And David didn't feel like a sinner when he sent for Uriah and had him sent to the battle lines to die. He felt like a king. And then he writes this: the subtlety of sin is that it doesn't feel like sin when we're doing it, right? You just feel like you're doing something right in the moment. You just feel like you're following your heart's desires. And listen, this is so important. I want us to understand this. It's really important for you and I to see what's going on here because we live in a culture where nobody, we don't really believe in a right or wrong anymore, right? Just as a general culture, we don't. It's pretty much, here's the language, just pursue whatever you feel like. Pursue whatever you want. Pursue whatever it is your heart desires. And here's the danger, right? Here's the danger of just giving in to whatever desire. Because again, we say things like today, follow your heart, which is like we believe this roadmap to human flourishing. But the problem, right, at least for a guy like me, is that if feelings, if emotions, if desires. And listen, I know you've all got some great desires, some great things you want to pursue, but if those become ultimate, right? If all of a sudden those become God, okay, well then I will follow the most fickle God in human history. Because listen, there are times for sure that I am fundamentally and emotionally unstable, okay? So are you, right? My wife finds it slightly entertaining at times. Other times she finds it slightly annoying. I know. But our culture says, follow your heart. That may be the worst advice America has ever given, right? Follow your heart. Like we don't even know really, we don't even really know what that means. Basically it means follow your feelings, which is a really terrible / scary blueprint for existence on planet Earth. Because can't we just admit, or I will admit, right? I'll be the one up here. I I don't always know. I don't always know what's going on in my heart, right? And there are for sure times I know I can't always trust my heart because what's going on there is not always great. And Jeremiah writes about this, the prophet, in Jeremiah 17, the heart is deceitful, come on, above all things and beyond cure. Who can understand it, right? And that's a rhetorical question, right? You're not supposed to raise your hand going, me, I know. And listen, every thriving civilization throughout human history, Christian or non-Christian, has recognized and acknowledged that human beings, right, us, are a mixed bag of nuts. We are emotionally, our feelings, our wants, our desires. So there are for sure some really good, really noble, really healthy desires. And there are also some really, really lousy desires that we have. And so we want to fan into flame and to cultivate and foster and encourage those really good desires. And there are some desires that we for sure want to shut them down. And we like to use the language today of going, oh, are you trying to repress them? Jesus would say, no, stronger language, crucify them, right? Fight and war and battle and take them out before they take you out. So if we're honest, right, I'll be honest. There's this war, this battle raging inside sometimes where we know if I do this, I really want it, and that's what I feel, but it's probably going to cause all kinds of periphery damage eventually. And so here's what we need, a teacher like Jesus to come along and show us the roadmap and the way forward so we can break free of what the New Testament calls desires of the flesh. And that simply means those desires that are ultimately, whether you feel like it now or not, out of sync with human flourishing and your ultimate joy. To which I would say this is why Jesus' teaching and his sayings here are probably more important today than even when he first spoke them. Because again, we're kind of in this era right now of follow your heart. Just follow your heart. And there may be times that's good, but you've got to at least tether that to some wisdom, because here Jesus is going, the real issue is adultery of the heart, right? If you follow that, it's going to cause major problems. Whenever I was in Bible college, so think about this, going through this section in the life of Christ, the professor made this statement when we got to this exact section. And he said, nobody is unfaithful, right? Has an affair, cheats on their spouse today, right? And he emphasized that word today. And I remember back then hearing that, and I was thinking at the time, what do you mean nobody cheats on their spouse today, right? Like, is this national no cheat holiday that I didn't know about? Did somewhere someone make a pact that they would agree for at least one day not to be unfaithful to their spouse? Because I'm fairly confident, right, that if we could gather information on every single couple around the entire world right now, that we would find there's somebody, right, like at least one person that is being unfaithful or having an affair. But here was his point, okay? His point was nobody got out of bed this morning, right? Just out of bed, out of the blue, skipped breakfast because you were in a hurry, got faint and lightheaded later in the day, lost your clothes, and then fell into bed with some complete stranger. You're like, oh my goodness, what just happened, right? No, he meant that weeks and months and maybe even years before that, right? It started with the look to lust. And you cultivated a desire that wasn't a healthy desire and kept feeding it. Which I would even say today in our culture, because we're just whatever we feel, we confuse love with lust, right? This is part of our problem. Think about this. So Paul wrote several books in the New Testament. In 1 Corinthians 13, he writes that little section, almost like a little poem on love. If you've been to a wedding, you may have heard it. So it's a great little definition of love if you're looking for it. And here's what he starts off with. And I just want to compare and contrast kind of love and lust. He says, love is patient. Meaning what? Love is not in a rush. Lust is always in a hurry, is it not? It does not want to wait for the next date. It for sure does not want to wait for marriage because it wants what it wants and it wants it now. When it comes to love, love is faithful. Love is fine to wait. And here's why. Because love is always in it for the long haul, right? Until death do us part. Lust is in it for the short term. As long as the emotional high lasts, well, then lust is there, right? And if those feelings are based on romantic feelings, maybe you get a few years, 2-3 years. I mean, I think this is a great survey of Hollywood. If it's just sex and sexuality, probably a shorter time frame than that. Love is selfless. Lust is selfish. Listen, love is an act of the will, right? It is. It's not just about feelings. You don't just fall in love and then you can fall out. It is a decision of the will that you make. And lust overrides the will with just a primal desire, maybe for sex, no matter what it costs the other person and no matter what it costs maybe your own soul in the process. And think about this, right? So now we have movies and we have books and we have blogs and we have magazines and television shows and music working really, really hard, right? Working overtime to try to sneak the latter in under the guise of the former. And those two are not alike at all. And so you have to realize when we oftentimes hear in our culture now, I love you. Okay, what that person often means in the movie, in the novel, in the relationship is, I want to have sex with you right now. And listen, I maybe do have feelings for you, and they may last a long time, or they may last a week or two, but I really want to act on those feelings right now, and we'll see. And listen, that's lust, right? It's not love, and those two aren't the same thing. They're not, and they don't have the same end result. And you've got to understand, there is a way out, right? With Jesus, there's always a way out. And think about this first, does Jesus command you and I not to lust? That's not a trick question, right? Just go back and look at the text. He does command us not to commit adultery, but with the lust section there, it's more like a doctor giving a diagnosis, right? So he says, don't, right? Like, do not ever again, he says, if we just come and say, do not ever again lust, starting right now today, it would be really easy for a lot of us guys to maybe just write that off going, come on, that's impossible, and to not even try. Like, okay, not a shot at that. But what does he do instead? Let's go back now and look at the text. Here's what he says. If, right? If, so it's maybe gonna happen, your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And then he'll say, and if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. Better for part of your body than for your whole body. And maybe you're new to church today and you're going, what? Whoa, wait a second. Yeah, we're about to move right now. We got the music into a decision and response time. I've got like a knife and some sharp objects right up front here. You can come forward and take care of business right now. We'll just go ahead and let you not stumble. I'm totally kidding. If you're new, like that would be so awkward. If you're not new, that would be awkward too, just so you know. Jesus is not teaching on self-mutilation, just so you're clear. And if he was, he missed the most obvious part of the body, right? So that's not the point here. That's not what's going on. This is hyperbole, right? This is exaggeration for shock effect. So like in the previous section on anger, when he talks about if you come to the altar and realize you've got an issue, some argument, disagreement with your neighbor, put your tennis shoes on and run the 80 miles probably back to the town you came from, settle matters with your neighbor, then run all the way back, and then you get to finish your sacrifice. Okay, it's exaggeration, but Jesus' point being, this is serious, take it seriously, right? Deal drastically with lust. Whenever that thing first pops up, whenever it comes into your mind, right, cut it out. Don't be casual, don't shrug, whatever. Boys will be boys, whatever, right? His point is, I would say this, don't manage sin, right? You don't want to manage. It's what Dallas Willard calls this, the gospel of sin management. You don't want to buy into that gospel. Don't try to manage it. Don't throw a Band-Aid over it and, pop an Advil and just try to get by. You amputate. That's what he's saying. Deal with it swiftly and severely. And when he says hell, So let me suggest this. Like we said a couple weeks ago, if you were here, I don't think he's referring to torture chamber for all eternity as much as hell on earth. Whether that come in the form of addiction or the inability to actually experience sexual pleasure with a real person, right? With your very real spouse. Or maybe the death of intimacy, or the crippling burden of just guilt and shame all the time. Or, God forbid, the death of a marriage, or the collateral damage from having an affair. It is hell on earth, right? And some of you know exactly what it's like to have hell on earth, whether you've walked through that personally, or you watched, witnessed, were subject to it from a parent, maybe you saw your neighbor walk through it. You know exactly what he's talking about. And Jesus is saying, listen, that started way back here with the second glance, right? With the lingering, hanging around, checking out the website, whatever, and it does something to your heart. So maybe you cultivate a desire that wasn't a great desire, and then it starts to take hold, and all of a sudden it creates lots of hurt. And Jesus is calling us to something better, right? He's calling us to this new kind of way to be human, and where we honor women, and where we honor our spouse, and where we honor our marriage, and we honor one another as image bearers of God. And listen, I think this one is especially difficult for the men, right? It is just in our day, in our culture, in our city, with technology today. This is very difficult for sure. But Jesus has not called you and I to something that's impossible. I would say he has called us to something that takes teaching, right? I think you're really smart to get here, show up, get into Bible study, learn to set your mind on thoughts above, and learn to think godly wisdom and God's thoughts after him. It will take practice. You might not get it right the first time. It might take some work to learn to avoid the look to lust. It takes community. You don't get this alone. You need friends that love you sometimes more than you love yourself, that can see the blind spot or see some of the signals that you are missing and will maybe press in when you need it. And more than anything, it takes the Holy Spirit, right? You just don't get this without God. And it will probably, for some of us, guys, maybe it takes some time, but this is how you become strong. And listen, this whole idea of look to lust, what he's addressing here, that is a habit of the mind, right? Do you understand that? Habit of the mind. It's not the law of gravity. It is not. It can be broken. I promise you, it can totally be broken. You can be the man, the woman that God has created you and I to be. But it may cost you something for sure, right? There may be some things you need to cut out, some things you need to put to death. What you watch, what you listen to, what you read, where you hang out. Maybe you need to get rid of the smartphone and go get you a flip phone, right? Whatever. Be smart, right? We war and we fight to honor our women, to honor sisters, to honor one another. And if you're in the room, right? If you're in the room today, and I know there's some guys, maybe you're feeling stuck, right? And you've kind of got down the path on this and it's taken root. You can find freedom. Right? And we want to pray with you. We want to find opportunities to help you do that, not to just fight to be innocent, but to be shrewd and set up some systems and places to help you accomplish that. We're about to have a Celebrate Recovery interest meeting just this Tuesday. If you would like to find out more about that and how to get involved, that is a great way to help deal with some habits that are not honoring of God. And listen, anybody can come for that. Whatever thing you're dealing with, or if you have a loved one dealing with that and you want to be part of this, come check it out on Tuesday. But we want you to find freedom. So we're going to stand and sing here in just a moment. And I want you to use that time to maybe surrender some stuff to God, to pray through some things, to be honest. I love this song, Good Grace, New Hillsong United song, because in the bridge it talks about clean hands, pure hearts, good grace, good God. And listen, this is how you get to clean hands and pure hearts. It is the good grace of a good God that's not looking to beat you up, but wants so much for you. And I would just encourage you, maybe today, you surrender that to him. So let me pray and we will stand and sing. Heavenly Father, we thank you that you're for us. You call us to so much more of this counterculture, upside down, new way of living that is beautiful and sometimes a fight, but so worth it. I pray for the person in the room right now that's just stuck, fighting, marriage is hurting, heart's hurting, quality of life is hurting, that they would just start releasing that to you and finding hope and freedom in our great eternal hope, Christ. And it's in his name we pray these things. Amen. Guys, would you stand as we sing?